Hey everybody, it's Dr. Ramon Goings with the Done Dissertation, and you're tuned into the Done Dissertation Office Hours, where we talk with researchers and doctoral students about their education and dissertation journey and all the great work they have done or plan to do with their doctoral degree. And again, I'm Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of the Done Dissertation, where we demystify the dissertation process so that you can finish your dissertation in record time. In today's episode, I have a great guest. I'm excited about this conversation as our guest for today, a week from today or a week past from today, actually just defended their dissertation. So everything that we're going to talk about is fresh on her mind, and she can talk through what it is like being a doctoral student, having just gone through the dissertation process. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Juanita Tookes to the Done Dissertation Office Hours, and we'll bring her on. Dr. Tookes, how you doing?
I am great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on. With the introduction, like you've just finished your degree, like what does it feel like to just have finished and, finish your defense and done, putting a period on the end of this?
You know what? It still feels very surreal and dreamlike, to be quite honest. Like I just had a moment yesterday where I was just sitting in my room and I'm like, you're done, right? Like you're done, like done forever, like done. There's nothing else that you have to do. So I'm still, even though it's been exactly 7 days since I defended, it still feels very surreal that I'm actually finished. So it hasn't quite hit me yet that I'm done, but it feels really good every time I have to remind myself that, hey, you passed, you're done, it's all over.
Yeah, and so I always say that, folks who get their doctorates, we're somewhat crazy, right? To have like stayed in education this long, gone through a bachelor's degree, master's degree, potentially onto the doctorate. But I'm always interested in people's journeys, right? So it always starts before all this. People see the final product, but there's something that happens in the past. And so can you talk a bit about your education journey? Like even starting out when you were younger, did you always like school and want to transition through? Like what was your education process? What did it look like for you?
Okay, so for me, I knew because I am spiritual and God is the leader of my life. So at 9 years old, God told me that I would be a doctor at 9. So around that time, I know it seems real like Hallmark movie-ish, but, I would be in my basement dressed up in a nurse's uniform, all white dress, and I would line up all my toys in a waiting room. I would have loose leaf paper that I would rip and create registration forms for my patients and do all of that. So I knew at a very young age that I wanted to be a doctor. Now, at that time, I didn't know all the different kinds of doctors, but I knew I was going to be one. So fast forwarding a little bit to high school, when I was 17, I took my first intro psychology class, Mr. Johnson's class, in 11th grade. And at that point, it was confirmed to me that I was going to be a doctor in the helping professions as a psychologist. So at that point, the following year, when I was a senior, I had my school had a on-site admissions fair. So I was admitted on-site to attend Wayne State University in Michigan. Wow. And went right on in after high school into college. And because I already knew what I wanted to do, I didn't really need to think about, I knew the classes. I already had looked at them under the psychology track. So took off running with that. 4.5 years later, got my bachelor's degree. And at this point, that's when I started taking intermittent breaks. So I was so tired of going through getting my bachelor's that I took 2 years off. Now, the thing about my bachelor's program is that I really, really enjoyed that time because I was a part of a federally funded TRIO program, which was the McNair Scholars Program. And that program focuses on minority students getting their doctorate degree. So they provide all of these resources to prepare you for grad school so that ultimately you can receive your doctorate degree. So even now, as a PhD graduate, the McNair Scholars Program was very supportive of me. They paid for my college application waivers and, they do periodic check-ins. And I thought that after so many years, they kind of just fell off with communication with students. But from me being 18 or 19 to me, I'm 36 now. So for them to still be there for me to reach out to was something that made me appreciate those types of programs even more. So after 2 years of just letting my brain grow back, in 2010, I went back for my master's at Wayne State in counseling psychology. In 2013, I graduated. And then after that, I took 3 years off to work in the field of mental health. And then I went back for my doctorate. So when I applied the first time, I got rejected from 4 schools, was very devastated about that and wasn't sure if I wanted to apply again because I didn't want to feel that type of rejection again. Yeah. But I applied again the year after, got in. in 2016. Fast forward, I'm at the end now in 2021, but I will say that the PhD is a different kind of degree. It put me through, I went through different kinds of intrapersonal experiences and interpersonal experiences that I never went through with my bachelor's and master's. This is the first degree that has changed me from the inside out as a person, not just as a professional, but as a person. I never went through this type of change with my other 2 degrees. It was just like you went to school, you got the piece of paper, woohoo, and that was it. The PhD is not like that. It is something that changes your whole entire existence. So yeah.
No, that right. You're talking about your journey, and you talk about the fact that you didn't get into graduate schools or doctoral programs the first time around. For a lot of students that are probably listening, that might be a deterrent, right? That you experience that rejection. Like, what was it about you, or what was it about your thought process that allowed you to actually go back and reapply? And did you end up reapplying to the same schools, or did you decide to change your school route? But like, what was that process? What did that look like for you when you reapplied?
Well, for me, the first time I applied, I wanted a ticket out of Michigan. Like, I didn't like the job at the time. I was tired of Michigan winters. I'm like, I want to go somewhere where the weather is warm and I can wear shorts all the time. So I applied to, I believe, 1 school here, which was Cleveland, and then I applied to 3 other schools out of state. I don't remember all of the ones that I applied for, but my ticket, I was trying to get out of here. So when I got the first 2 rejections, it did hit me hard, but I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I got 2 more out there. It's fine. When those last 2 came in, I was like, oh my God, okay, well, now I'm stuck because I thought that I was going to be up out of here. So now I have to stay in this job that I don't like. I'm not in school, and I felt like a failure. And so what I did was I gave myself an explanation to make sense of the fact that I got rejected from multiple schools. And we do that when rejection has a tendency to make us create something to make sense of something that doesn't always make sense or doesn't necessarily have an explanation. So I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. You got rejected out of multiple schools because you're not smart enough to get a PhD. Simple. That's why you got rejected, because you're not smart enough. So the following year, actually, it was one of my staff. I was a manager at a clinic at the time, and she had already known that I had gotten rejected the year before. And she came to me and she kind of slid some information about for a university here, Western Michigan University. And she was like, I think you need to look at this. Okay. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to look at that. Like, you remember what I went through. I was very apprehensive about applying again. But then I had to think about not only the fact that one of my good friends and staff was encouraging me, but also I could not see myself in the future working at that job. I'm like, in order to get a job that I don't mind going to every day, I'm going to need a key. And for me, that key was the PhD. That was my key. But I was hesitant because I'm like, I just don't want to get rejected again. So I actually applied to only 2 schools, which was half of the amount that I did the year before. And I'm like, this lessens your chances, right? If you got rejected, here comes that doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
4 schools, what makes you think that you're going to get accepted if you only apply to 2? But I'm like, you know what? If I don't get accepted this time, then maybe that just wasn't my route, and I'm just going to accept it and move on. So I got accepted at Oakland, and I did not get accepted at the other school. So that rejection came first. So I'm like, here we go again.
Here we go again. Yeah.
And so Oakland came back, and when that rejection came back, I did the mistake of, and I'm not going to say mistake, but it's powerful because I tend to document moments. So I had my friend standing right there. I'm like, yeah, record it. I'm about to open the letter. I'm opening the letter. I only saw 2 sentences. I already knew what the letter said, that I did not get in. And so my friend is recording and doesn't know that I got rejected. So I actually have that moment on tape. But it makes this moment that much sweeter because I did get accepted at Oakland. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was excited, prepared for my interview, and then got in. So for those who are getting rejections, or if you're afraid of getting rejected, it's completely okay because you don't know what God has in the background. Because when I got accepted, it was explained that the year that I applied, no one got in because they were doing basically reconstructing the program, taking out credits and changing classes around. And so they didn't admit anyone the year that I applied. But see what I told myself? That I wasn't smart enough to get a PhD. That's why I didn't get in. If I wouldn't have applied again, I would not have known that no one got in. To do with my intelligence. It's just no one got in. So
yeah. And I'll give an interesting story about rejection too. So when I was applying for doctoral programs, I got rejected. I applied, I think 4 or 5 programs. I only went one time. And so I applied to 4 or 5 of them. My GRE scores were so low, right? And so that knocked me out from the top ranking schools. I couldn't get into any of them. I had one school that said, well, we know you're actually a strong applicant, but can you take the MAT? And I was like, all right, I'll take the MAT, the Miller Analogies test. And I was like, all right, I'll take it. I did okay, right? But still not enough to meet their threshold, but they wouldn't let me in. And so Morgan State, where I got my doctorate from, was the one institution that brought me in. And interestingly, now being 5 or 6 years removed from my doctorate, all those institutions I didn't get into I've been offered jobs by all of them in some form of capacity. So it's like funny. And the same professors that like I actually got denied from are still there. And I just laugh about it. They don't know. They probably don't remember I was an applicant. But it's just stuff like that always happens. Like you said, what's for you will be for you at the time is meant for you.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Goings. I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that the PhD process taught me was about the essence of time and how it is not yours. You don't control the time that it takes for you to complete the PhD. Now, a lot of people might be like, yeah, I do. You know, if I work hard and do it. And that's exactly what I was thinking. And I was working hard. I lined all my classes up. I did all the calculations. I lined up everything on a timeline. I'm like, yeah, by 2020, by 2019, 2020, I should be out of here. Yeah, that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. So it's one of those things where I have learned to not be a control freak.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was until I entered a process where I had no control. Like I could not really control this. And that's what's different about the other 2 degrees too. The PhD is so unpredictable at times. Like you can finish all your coursework on time, and your dissertation process may take you further down the timeline than you initially anticipated. Things can go wrong with your research. There's so many unpredictables. If you are somebody who is just bent on control, this is going to frustrate you. So I ended up having really intense issues with anxiety because I started to become afraid of the things that I could not control. And so I tried to manipulate as much as I could, and it just ended up combusting with inside of my mental. And so I'm like, you need to really calm down and just accept that you are not going to understand or know everything about this process, but just remind yourself that you will finish. When it is time for you to finish, you will finish. My classmates, there was only 3 people in my cohort. Mm-hmm. My classmates finished before me. And that really hit me hard because
that does something to students. I don't know what it is. When you see your friends start to graduate, it hurts.
You know, because I'm like, because again, with me, here goes this negative explanation as to why I didn't finish. You're doing something wrong. You're not working hard enough. Like you just can't cut it. And I'm like, so I was in that place for a minute where I really thought it was something about me. And so I tried to rev it up. I'm like, I'm gonna work even harder. And I had to accept that my graduation date is not going to be set by me. Just do what you know you need to be doing. You will graduate. And I'm saying that to people out there who's doubting whether or not you're going to make it and graduate. You are going to graduate. You just need to accept that you don't create the time of your graduation date. You will, though. You will.
Yeah, yes. At some point, I always tell people that you can't control everyone else, but you can't control how fast or slow you work. That's about the only thing you have to control, but you can't control people's reactions or response time. So it's just like you said, you control things you can, and most you can't, unfortunately. Yep. And going into you feel like you can, but really I'm like, you really have to satisfy the committee members in a way. You have to kind of play that game in order to get out of this process. Otherwise, you just be sitting stuck for years trying to figure out why am I not finishing?
But you know what? You bring up a really good point about the game. And me and my colleague, who just recently finished as well, was talking about this game that we have to play when it comes to the PhD. And sometimes it's insulting because it's like, why do I have to play a game but think about it though. It's not playing a game like you're not taking this serious. It's playing a game in the context of being strategic. You have to know what battles you need to fight and what battles you need to let go. So a lot of times people want to be very opinionated about what they want to include in their dissertation and what they want to write. Your chair or your committee may not see what you're seeing. If it's nothing major, just let it go. You have your whole career to carve out and do and say and write whatever you want to. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes you do just have to satisfy what your committee wants. You may not understand why, it may not make sense, but you have to think about the goal. If you're trying to get done, you are trying to get finished. Your dissertation doesn't have to be flawless, but you want it finished. And I have to move from that mentality of, I want a perfect, flawless dissertation. No, you just want it put together and done. You met all the requirements. Now you have the rest of your career to do whatever you want, however you want.
No, I tell people all the time, like perfection, if you're seeking perfection, you will spend too much time and money only to find out it doesn't exist, right? And so it's like no point to seek perfection. Like you said, you want to be done with this process and move on. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And for those who are just tuning in, we have Dr. Juanita Tookes with us, recently finished her PhD. So all of the comments that we're talking about right now is fresh in her mind, just to finish a week ago. So these things are right on time. And then if you have questions as audience members and you're watching this live, feel free to drop those questions in the comments, and we'll bring them up on screen and actually address those as we're going through our interview. But I want to transition a little bit. We start talking about the dissertation process. And so when you got into your doctoral program, I always find that there's a transition that has to happen for students, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, what was your experience like with writing? Because that's probably the biggest thing I get with students that come to me is like, I struggle with writing, or I have all these limiting beliefs about writing. So what was your writing experience like? And did you have those negative thoughts kind of going into the process?
Well, you know what? I wouldn't say that I had any negative thoughts, but I did kind of question my writing ability. So when in my doctoral interview, one of the faculty that was asking me questions asked me a particular question about writing and what did I think, of my writing. And I thought, I'm like, well, at that point, I had not been in school for like 3 years. So I haven't written anything since my master's thesis. So I'm like, I think, this is my interview. Right. I'm not going to be like, yeah, my writing is bad. I'm trying to get in.
Right, trying to get in. Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, my writing is pretty good. I think it could only be elevated and sharpened, with the guidance of this program, something that I said. But it was my first semester, my first class, where the assignment was to do a 17-page paper. I think outside of my master's thesis, which I don't even know, I don't remember how long that was, but it's been a long time since I had to type a long document. And so 17 pages was a lot to me. When I think about my 200-page dissertation now, I laugh. But at that point, like, okay. So I worked real hard, got the document done, but my professor tore it up, like with edits and changes. I've never seen so much red in my life. I'm like, okay, so my writing isn't that great. So my writing did shapen, and it did become more academic sounding. And I was happy about the development that my writing skills had taken. But the shocking part was, even though at the end of my coursework, which took me 3 years, I was really proud of how my writing had come along, the dissertation is a different kind of writing experience. I thought that I was really good at writing before the dissertation. I had to go into another depth of writing when it came to this. And I'm like, wait a minute, why is this writing so, because my chair was giving me, and my chair was no chill on the critique. Very meticulous with everything. Your writing is disorganized. This doesn't make sense. My grammar was off. So all of the positive thoughts that I had about my writing before was like, poof, be gone. Because I'm like, I'm back at square one again. But what I will say is that the dissertation, even though it was extremely tough, my writing now I'm more proud of it than I was at the end of my coursework period. Like, I am very happy with the way that I can organize my thoughts and organize and structure the body of my work now. Sure. And I would not have been able to do that without the dissertation. So my writing from the start to now, definitely a transformation, a metamorphosis, if you will. But the dissertation process definitely helped with the writing, because it wasn't there in the beginning, obviously.
Yeah. And so, with your writing, did you do anything in particular, like to improve? Was it through your reading? Was it through practice? What did you do to improve?
You know what? I would say that it was a lot with the reading, because, with throughout the whole time, I've had to read things. I've had to read and scan articles. I've had to do response papers. A lot of it was literature review, and not just with the dissertation, just throughout the whole program. I had to always review literature on something. So the more literature that you read, you learn different words. You start to see kind of the structure of how articles are done. I know in my doctoral seminar, a big core of that class was how to break down articles, how to read and understand articles, how to skim them to get the information that you're really trying to get to. And so when you're doing all of this mental input, as far as vocabulary and structure and organization of thought, it kind of rubs off on the way that, not rubs off, I'll say it influences the way you start to read and structure your writing and your own thinking. So I would definitely say just reviewing and reading tons of literature, mainly from journal articles, I would say.
Yeah, that was definitely my process. Like I was a struggling writer. I tell people all the time. I actually kept all my papers from my doctoral program, and I had a professor, Dr. Shockley, Kemet Shockley, and from Howard, and he was my professor at Morgan State. And on page 3 of one of my first papers, he wrote a big X and then said, "You need to see a writing coach immediately." And like I took that to heart. I was like, "Man, what are you talking about? Like I got this," and I really didn't. And so like I did what you said. Like I read one article every year, one article every day for a year, in order to improve my writing. And I was highlighting vocabulary, looking at words up in the dictionary. Like, you just got to study this thing. It's so important.
Yeah, like, and I did that too. Like, I read a lot of articles, and when I saw words, and I'm like, ooh, that would sound nice in conversation. You know, I would highlight that word, look it up, because you do want to expand your vocabulary and how you speak, especially because not only what you're reading, but who you're talking to. You know, when you're talking with faculty and you're talking with colleagues, they're using certain words and vocabulary. You know, I remember when I was talking with a faculty member talking about pedagogy, and I'm like, that was the first time I had heard that word. I'm like, well, you know, pedagogy. I'm like, okay, I need to start taking this in, because I want to sound, you know what I'm saying? And it's not to front or to put on some type of performance, but it's like, if you're going to step into this role, you want to be like a sponge and soak up everything. If I'm going to say that I'm a doctor, I definitely want to sound like one. So I am going to have to step up on my vocabulary. I'm definitely going to have to step up on how I articulate and organize my thoughts, how I speak. You know, I'm a public speaker. I love speaking. A lot of people, that makes them nervous. Speaking never makes me nervous, but it's like, when I speak, I don't want to just be talking like I'm just talking off the cuff all the time.
Sure.
I know how to adapt my language to my audiences, but at the same time, I do want my audience to know that, hey, this lady knows what she's talking about, because she sounds like she knows what she's talking about. Yeah.
Sometimes like, I got to talk the talk. I could put on that language. Sometimes I'm with people, and then someone calls me about something related to research. I change the whole tone. Wait a minute, that wasn't what you were just explaining to us, 5 minutes ago. Like, how did you do? It's like a switch. You just cut it on and off when you need to. But that's definitely interesting. You bring that up, and so you've improved your writing throughout your program, and you're getting ready for your dissertation. So like, talk to us about your dissertation study, and then like, what was the impetus to actually engage in that particular study about your particular topic?
Okay. So my dissertation is exploring the strong Black woman schema and wellness with Black women who attend predominantly white institutions. So what really inspired me to do this particular topic was based on my own experience. I'm a Black woman who has attended PWIs throughout my whole college journey. But it was at the PhD level where I started to, well, not even me, it was reflected that something wasn't right with how I was not taking care of myself. And a colleague of mine, who was also a woman of color, had pointed out, like, hey, something is off. Like, what's going on? I'm thinking I'm doing fine, but I really wasn't fine. And once she highlighted that to me, I started seeing just how much I wasn't doing for myself. So my first year of my PhD program, I worked extremely hard. I did very well. But at the end of that year, I burned myself completely out. Mm-hmm. And then going into the next year, I kind of did the same thing. So the next year, I lost a ton of weight because I wasn't eating properly, wasn't sleeping well. And then I had unfortunate encounters with professors and colleagues, other students, who would say certain things to me that would highlight something wrong with me as a Black woman. So I remember I was taking a social, I think it was a social it was a diversity class. Uh-huh. There was a video being shown about little Black girls. It was a study about how Black girls perceive beauty. And so it was a study with dolls, and they were asked to pick which doll was pretty and which doll was ugly. The Black dolls were ugly. The white dolls were pretty. That caused me to become upset, because I remember feeling like that when I was a little girl too. So I started to feel like I was about to cry. And so I kind of excused myself from the class to kind of gather myself in the hallway. And a classmate came out, the same one who I was just talking about, came out to see if I was okay. And the professor came out to the hall and basically said, "You two need to get back in the class right now." And when we came back in the class, he was like, "I had to stop my whole class because of you."
Oh, wow.
And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to let anybody see how I feel in here. If it's going to make me a spectacle, like I've done something wrong, because now everyone is looking at me. And I'm like, I'm never going to have that type of feeling again. So I'm never going to show how I really feel. If I'm having a problem, you're not going to know it. If I'm upset, I'm going to keep it inside. And if you ask me how I really feel, I'm going to lie to you, because you're never going to put me in that position again. But doing that, holding all of that inside, only destroyed me slowly. It was like a slow death type of situation. And so I wondered, how many Black women in my position are also going through this whole thing where you're not taking care of yourself, but you're portraying like you are because you're trying to avoid uncomfortable and unfortunate circumstances and situations like microaggressions. I've had people walk up to me and say things that's like, did you really let that come out of your mouth? Like, seriously? But I didn't react because I don't want to come off as, oh, you know, Black women, they always got attitudes and they always, so I'm putting on this face, but inside I am boiling. Like, I'm having classmates tell me, hey, how did you get your own office? You don't work hard. I'm the first one here and the last one to leave, and you're going to tell me that I don't work hard. But again, you keep it inside. And instead of just saying what I feel, I said, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to work even harder. So I'm not sleeping and not eating. And I'm dealing with all of this mental crap. I'm dealing with anxiety and stress. And so this is what really sparked my dissertation topic. I wanted to know, are other Black women doing this? Are they feeling like this? Do you understand what wellness is? Because at that point, I didn't know. I didn't know about wellness. I didn't know about the strong Black woman schema. I had no idea that there could be a relationship that really influenced how I perceive myself and my world and my daily interactions with other people. So that's where my dissertation topic came from, my initial experience as a Black woman in a PhD program at a PWI.
So, you know, a lot of ways, like you said, your research stems from your own lived experiences, which is great. Like I always recommend, if you have that connection to your research, that's perfect. It makes it even more meaningful for you. Now, based on you actually conducting your study, what did you find? Did you find anything different than what you thought going in? Like, talk about your findings and what you take away from the project.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, like we all know, we've all heard of the strong Black woman out here, right? But I think what Black women don't, and Black people, and maybe people in general just don't understand, is that there is a negative version or connotation to the strong Black woman schema. The way that literature has described the strong Black woman schema, and the way that my literature also describes it, is Black women being strong no matter what. You could be going through trauma. You could be going through mental health issues, stress, frustration, disappointment. Doesn't matter. You be strong no matter what. That is not healthy. There's nothing wrong with a person being strong and being motivated, but when you're strong, you also accept your weaknesses and you're not ashamed of those. The strong Black woman schema, the way that I have described it in my research, that's the opposite. You are not accepting weak, because the whole purpose of putting on the strong Black woman schema is so that you are not perceived as weak by anybody. So that's something that I definitely wanted to make sure that I highlighted and explained so that Black women know the difference. There's nothing wrong with being a strong Black woman as long as you can accept that you do not have to be strong all the time. And that's completely okay. As far as the wellness aspect, I wanted to see if there was a relationship between the two, because I anticipated that there would be. If you're busy putting on this performance and, displaying these characteristics, because what are the characteristics of the strong Black woman? Being strong all the time, not asking for help, being very independent, taking care of other people, always focusing on other people. If Black women are endorsing these character traits, then it was my guess that they probably would not be taking care of their own needs and pertaining to their wellness. And that is what my results, a primary finding of my results showed, was that women who endorse certain characteristics of the strong Black woman schema had a low ability to cope with the frustrations and disappointments of life. So definitely a strong and significant negative relationship between the two. And so when I saw that, I'm like, wow, like it kind of really highlighted this thing about how can you cope if you're not coping? Because you're too busy trying to let everyone know, hey, I can handle death. And we have to think, when I talk about death, we had this whole thing of this social injustice. People, police brutality, people being killed in the street, all of these riots, not to mention the political circus that we, recently exited. All of this stuff was having effects on Black folks, the Black community at large, but women wanted to make sure that they were, my son just got killed by a police officer, but I'm gonna be strong about it because I got to be strong for my family and got to be strong for my community. I got to let people know that no matter what you do, you're not gonna faze me. And it's like, you're not even allowing yourself to take in the fact that your son just died. You don't have to be strong right now. Like, you don't have to prove a point to anybody.
Right.
You don't. But again, this mentality didn't start here. It started from these transgenerational messages that we have gotten from our foreparents, grandmothers, great grandmas, big mama, nana, all of that.
Right.
That they taught Black women and Black girls to be strong in order to protect them. But it really was counteractive, as time went on. So that was a primary finding of my results that really made me open my eyes as to whereas it was like, wow, Black women really are not coping well with stressful things, which could be in the scope of the college environment. You could be stressed out with classes, or you might be stressed out with a particular professor if they're saying something to you or saying something that they shouldn't be saying, or maybe you feel like you can't cut it or can't handle it. But if you're not communicating what you need to your instructors, you are not putting yourself in a position to be helped, which means you have to carry that bag all day, every day. And that's not good.
And so there was a couple of things there that, you talked about. One is that in many ways, if I'm hearing how you described your journey, right, your findings really reflected your own experience in many ways, right? If I'm understanding that correct. And so with that, there's a lot of folks in doctoral programs who, Black women who are experiencing this phenomena. And so what advice do you have for them on how to cope and how to get through graduate school, knowing how stressful the doctoral experience can be, particularly at an institution where you might be one of few or the only Black woman or even a Black student period in your program?
Yeah. So I was always the only, in each one of my degree experiences, the only, or maybe one of two, But what I suggest for Black women is, if you do attend a predominantly white college, is you need to find community. You need to find it. You need to find it. It's there somewhere. You need to find it. So what I did was I joined a PhD support group, 2 of them actually on my campus. Now, the PhD support group did not address my issues as a Black woman student, but it did give me some peace because I was surrounded by people who just knew how demanding the PhD process was. And that was a relief, because I could not talk really to anyone like in my friend group or my family, because I'm a first generation student. So no one got it. So I felt like, the PhD process can be so isolating and so lonely, especially when you feel like no one understands. Yeah. So I would suggest trying to find groups or organizations on campus specific at the PhD level that can support the struggles and difficulties that you're having by other people. So when you say something like, man, that chapter 2, that's all you need to say, because everyone in that group knows about the beast of chapter 2. You don't even have to explain. We're just nodding our heads and feeling for you because we've all been through that, versus you having to do a thorough breakdown about what a chapter 2 is and what you have to do and stuff like that. So find community, find support within organizations on campus. If you cannot find that type of supportive resource, maybe you need to think about creating one. Creating some type of initiative. I know my great colleague and friend, her name is Dr. Celeste Smith. She defended her dissertation a couple of weeks before me. When she got there, she saw that there was no Black organization for graduate students. So she created the Black Graduate Student Association on Oakland University's campus. And it was hard for her to get that thing started. She asked me to be her VP. And I was like, you know what? Why not? So
Right.
She did that initiative because she didn't see a supportive resource. So she created one. So I think that's really, really important, because if you can't find it, don't give up. Like, I can't find we don't have that on my campus. Well, maybe you need to create one. And maybe you don't want to take on such a responsibility, but you have to think, if you don't start something, everybody's just going to be dealing with the same thing and nobody's going to be really getting helped. So find community, find some support groups, some organizations. If you don't have any, maybe think about creating or initiating one. Also, go to see a therapist. Therapy helped me a lot going through my PhD process, just talking about how frustrated I was and just how hard it was, and just getting those thoughts out was really, really helpful for me and my mental health. It kind of relieved a lot of pressure on my brain because I was holding so much of it inside as far as the stress, difficulties I was having with my chair, difficulties that I was having writing my dissertation in this very sensitive cultural time where every time I looked on the news, somebody who had my skin color was dying. You know, there was a public funeral for people who look like me, but I'm writing a dissertation that is richly infused with racial content. That itself was very difficult, writing about race and then seeing these same problems in society today. So my dissertation did a timeline starting from the 1600s. So I'm talking about when slavery first began.
Yeah.
It was very devastating to me to see that things that happened in the 1600s were really no different than what was happening in 2020.
Right.
No different. The same violence, the same discrimination, the same racism, sexism, the same problems was still here. So I needed someone to listen to the fact that it's hard for me to write this because I'm still seeing this. So how much change has really occurred? And I got angry about that, which kind of pulled me away from writing. It got really hard to write sometimes because I'm sick of reading about slavery. I'm sick of reading about how Black people are getting abused. I'm sick of reading about how Black people couldn't read and wasn't able to get into college. It was very, very frustrating. So therapy helped me kind of get some of those thoughts out so that I could go back to writing. Different organizations on campus and support groups really helped. So those are the three things that I would suggest.
No, that's great advice. And with that too, right? So we definitely need that to support our mental health going through the programs. But now when you get in particular, I want to just focus a little bit on the dissertation process itself, because that, people go through coursework. It's pretty structured. You've got your classes, you got your assignments, they do on a certain dates,
Yep.
All right, I'm going to get it done. But when you get to dissertation, it's like, all right, see you later, figure it out. And I'll see a proposal when it's ready, or I'll see chapter 1 when it's ready. So what advice would you give for doc students who are trying to figure out, how do I navigate this dissertation process? You can kind of take it wherever you want to go, because there's multiple aspects that, we could talk about.
But you know what, Ramon, you highlighted, you said it perfect. I was used to structure. Okay. When you are a person who is dealing with anxiety in particular, structure helps because I know what's ahead. Sure. I know what to do. Like, it doesn't matter if this assignment is due 2 months from now. If I want to get it done now, I can get it done now if I want to. I was used to getting syllabi. I was used to seeing what I can look forward to this whole 14 weeks. Baby, when you get to the dissertation process, it is so unstructured. You don't get a syllabus. You don't get an introduction. You don't get nothing. There is no timeline. It's basically, like you said, see you later. When you get this done, email me and then we'll go. It was a complete shock to me because I had never worked in such an autonomous type of capacity. I'm like, so we don't talk from week to week. Like, I just call you or email you whenever. Like, how am I supposed to? So I had to realize that this is on you. Yeah. This is where discipline comes in, because you have to be disciplined. You have so much time on yourself. You can easily procrastinate. And guess what? Nobody's going to know nor care because it's on you. You're going to hold yourself up if you procrastinate. You don't want to write for 3 months? Hey, don't. It's on you. Because the world's going to keep going and you're going to keep being in this program paying tuition every semester if you're not going to do it. So I first had to realize that I am on my own time. I'm already a disciplined person, so I wasn't worried about the discipline part. Okay. But I did have to learn how to break down my writing, because I used to hear this thing of write every day, write every day, write every day. So I'm like, okay, I'll write every day. But writing every day, I think that's only appropriate at some points, because you can write so much to where you're really overloading yourself and you're burning yourself out, to whereas I don't even know what to write. I don't even know what to write anymore. So you have to design your dissertation process in a way that really helps you be successful. I had to figure out, what are my optimal times of being productive? Definitely not after 2 o'clock. So I'm going to get up at 7 a.m. My optimal time of functioning is early morning. I can get up at 6:30, knock out about 5 pages, read whatever it is I have to read, email whoever I have to email. But after about 1:30, 2 o'clock, it starts to slow down for me. So I had to realize, what is my best time of day to work? How many days out of the week are you going to work? what is being realistic with those hours? So we're not going to do 8-hour shifts every day because my wellness is not going to be impacted any further than it already has been. So I'm like, okay, how about from 6 to 10, latest 10:30? That's when you're going to get your writing in. Weekends are off. Like weekends are just for you to recuperate. And mind you, I'm working. I work 2 jobs. The dissertation and the PhD was like a 3rd job.
Yeah.
So basically I'm working 3 jobs. So it's like you got to be realistic with what you can do and the capacity of time that you have it. Now, mind you, I am a single woman. I have no kids. I am not married. People who have been through this process with a whole family, listen, hats off to y'all, because I don't even understand how y'all even get writing in. I have a colleague who had to wait until 11:30 p.m. when all of her kids were bathed, fed, went to bed, cooked dinner. I'm like, 11:30? I can't write anything at 11:30 p.m.? Hats off to those who have families and are running households, because I don't even, it was hard for me just doing it with me. But yeah, that was kind of the process. I had to figure out, okay, Juanita, how are we going to do this? I still had to create some type of structure in an unstructured domain, if that makes sense.
No, that's so important. Yeah. That whole, like, when you get your writing done is key. And that's why I created the Velocity Group coaching program, where I actually guide folks through the process. And I created the structure because, like you said, it's so unstructured. Like, I got to walk you through this, because otherwise, if you don't have that structure and you need it, this process can get away from you. And 2 years have passed and you have nothing to show for it.
And I've heard stories like that, like being a part of these support groups. I've heard people who is like, I've gotten stuck and I couldn't get out of it. And now it's a year later and I haven't written anything. Now I have to refresh myself on what I did write. But I also think it's the type of committee that you have too.
Yeah.
The type of chair that you have. My chair told me from the beginning, I'm very hands off. So it's going to really be on you. I'm not going to send you reminders. I'm not going to do check-ins. I'm not going to do any of that. The benefits of the chair that I had was, even though he was hands off, which kind of was okay because I was already disciplined, his turnaround time was super fast. So whenever I sent him something, within 24 hours, I was getting a response. Some chairs are not like that. I've heard some instances where feedback wasn't given back for a month and a half, and I didn't want that. So it all depends on your chair. It also depends on your committee. Like, I really wasn't in communication with my committee like that. Really just one, there's 4 people on a committee. I was really only in contact with my chair and one other person. I didn't really see or talk to my other 2 committee members until the defense. So again, everybody's committee is different. Your level of communication will be different. There will be some chairs who will be like, yeah, we do weekly check-ins or every 2 weeks. But my chair was not like that. It's like, basically, it's on you. You let me know when you're ready to go forward. If you know you're the type of person who needs more structure, you need to take that into consideration when choosing your chair and your committee as well.
Yeah, and something that you bring up, which people don't think about, I talk about in my book, 14 Secrets to a Done Dissertation, right? I talk about this idea of communication. Like, the number one key word to get through the process is communication. The fact that you probably had a conversation with your chair to ask, hey, what does feedback time look like? How do you want me to approach working with you? And the fact that they could say, hey, I'm hands off. You come to me when you have something, I'm not checking in. That's a conversation versus you having expectations of them being hands on. And then when they're not hands-on, you getting frustrated. Like, it's their fault. It's their fault when you didn't have a conversation.
Yeah. And my chair was actually very forthcoming with that information in the beginning. So I didn't have to initiate that conversation, but you do bring up a very good point. Sometimes you do have to speak up. In the dissertation process, I've learned the power of my voice and knowing when to use it. You know what I mean? And getting that information at the start is very important. What kind of chair are you? How do you typically work with students? What is your turnaround time on feedback? What are your expectations of me, as your student doing this? Like, when I think about it, I'm thankful that my chair was so forthcoming, but I think, what if I had a chair who didn't do that type of intro? Then I just wouldn't have known. And then you get surprised along the way, and then you get mad at them for not telling you when really you also had a responsibility to ask. Right. So knowing this goes back into what we were talking about, knowing what battles to pick. You have to understand your voice. You have to stand by your research. There's been plenty of times where I did have to stand up and be assertive about, you may not understand this point, but this is very important to me. It connects with my writing in this way. And I'm going to have to explain it to you because I don't want to delete this part. Now, all the other stuff that you asked me to delete, fine. But this part is key. So I needed to stay. So I had to learn how to not be afraid of speaking with my chair and with faculty about things that I thought was important to me and my research, because this is like my baby, right? So the defense is exactly what it is. You have to defend what you have worked so hard to produce. You have to defend it against faculty. You have to defend it against people who don't know what you're talking about, your chair, the world. You have to be ready to protect what you have produced. You know what I mean? So, but again, you don't want to pick a fight about everything. So you have to use some wisdom with how you assert yourself, but your voice is very important in the dissertation process.
No, that's so important. And I just want to give a special shout out to one of my former clients, future Dr. Jennings. If you're listening to this or you catch the record, I'm going to send this to you. This is the part you need to listen to. We just had this conversation. That's why it's so important. I'm just telling her, like, actually, you need to tell your chair at this point in time, like, I want to keep this part in my dissertation for these reasons and not get it deleted because of the chair or committee member's perspective. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, because there were times where, like, even when my defense date was undetermined and, you know, my chair told me, you know, I said, well, you know what, I think if I'm doing everything that I can do, I should be done in June. That's pretty optimistic, Juanita. I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, I know that faculty and chairs cannot really say, yeah, you're going to defend by this date.
Right.
But at the same time, I knew what I was doing and what I was producing. If I'm giving you what you asked me within a 24-hour period, and if I'm working every day, there should be no reason why I should be going into this to the fall. And I had to have this conversation with my chair about, I know you can't promise me anything, but I do want you to support what I'm trying to do. And I think that's important for chairs to be supportive, because, of course, we can't predict this process. But I did have to stand up and say, hey, now, wait a minute now. It's been 2 years that I've been working on this. If I'm doing everything that I know to be doing, then there is no reason why I can't finish around this range of time.
Right.
And I had to speak that up and be strong on that. And thank God it actually did line up that way. But I think a lot of students become intimidated because of the power differential, or you want to make waves, or maybe this person could hold me up from graduating. If you are having any of these fears, communication is key. You need to talk with your chair and your committee if you have certain reservations like that, because it's only going to impede you as you try to finish this process. If you're in the back of your head, you think that your team isn't in your corner for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, that's key. Communication, like anything else that folks don't take out from this, is that communication is key to getting through this process. And so, you know, we talked about your journey, kind of your experiences going through the dissertation process. But as I mentioned, kind of before we came on air, I want to talk a little bit about the dissertation defense. You know, as of all the parts of the process that people really are scared of, oftentimes it's the defense, because they don't know what questions there's going to come at them, all these types of things. And in my program, we actually do a specific session with clients about the defense, because I want them to be prepared and not feel like they're getting ambushed with questions. And so based on this, you know, final dissertation defense being fresh, a week from your defense, what was that experience like? And what were some things that, you know, you were prepared for? Were there any questions that you got asked that you were like, ooh, they caught me with this one, I got to really think on my feet? So talk about that experience for me.
So the defense was I don't even have a word for it. It was very exciting. It was a very exciting event, especially when I got my date. When you get that date, it's like, now it's real. It's real. Yeah. I have to be done, you know, in a minute. So I started to psych myself out in the beginning, because I started, of course, creating my PowerPoint presentation. And I'm like, the challenge here is to get all of this content in a very short presentation. I only had 30 minutes. I got 200 pages worth of content. So what I actually used was the guide from my proposal defense, which basically already had outlined my first 3 chapters. So I had to do a little bit of tweaking with that. And then I'm like, okay, you just got to add 4 and 5 in and you'll be okay. So once I got my presentation together, because that was a challenge, getting all of this into I started psyching myself out, because I was doing note cards. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot this. And I forgot to say this as I was practicing by myself. And then I had to say, wait a minute, Juanita, you've been working on this for how long? How long? It hasn't even just been the 2 years of the dissertation, because I was intentional when I entered the program. So every assignment that I had, it had something to do with Black women. It had something to do with them not coping well with stress or something like that. So I'm like, you've been doing this for 5 years. It just got finely tuned within these last 2 with the dissertation process formally starting. But you know this stuff. So don't overanalyze things that you already know. And that's what I'm going to tell all of you out there. You know what you're working on. You have the most closest, most intimate relationship with your own research. So don't get up there and let the defense intimidate you like you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what you've read. You've written these pages. You've done the edits 15,000 times. I had to revise my chapter 2 15 times. I don't know what I'm talking about because I do. So once I got out of my head, I realized I didn't need note cards, not a lot of them,
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about. So I practiced with, and I have my little notepads on the wall or whatever, because I would record my times. So
Yeah, that's smart. That was
it's
really
not
smart.
enough for me to practice by myself, though. I need to practice with people who do not know what I'm talking about. So this is where I called my friends up and was like, hey, remember when I helped you move 2 weeks ago? I need you to sit down and listen to a Zoom presentation for 30 minutes about my dissertation topic.
Yeah, that was smart. Yeah, that was really smart to do it
But
that way.
it's good to practice with people who are not in academia, because if you can explain such a complex, intricate concept, whatever your topic is, to them, and they understand, and they have good questions, because their questions are going to come from a genuine place of really trying to get it.
Yeah.
So that's what the benefit is of practicing with people who are not part of academia. So I practiced with myself, with my friends. I practiced with my chair twice. So I had a mock twice. So altogether, I think I practiced about 10 times.
Okay.
And after that, so when my defense date was determined, it was like a week and a half to 2 weeks out. So I had practiced 10 times within that period. And then I integrated rest periods where you didn't look at your presentation at all for about 2 or 3 days. Like, you just chill. Don't do nothing. Don't write another note card. Don't try to create another slide. Don't even open up your laptop. Just go out and have fun.
Yeah.
Don't do anything. So practice, along with attending to my wellness, is what made the defense so smooth. I got in there, it was defense day, and I could feel my anxiety kicking up 1 hour beforehand. Now, this whole time I was fine.
Smooth. Yeah.
My anxiety kicked in and I had to do some deep breathing. I texted one of my friends and said, hey, because they had already said, you got this. I'm like, can you tell me I got this again? I got this hits a lot different when you're presented with a situation that actually questions whether or not you have it. I've said that statement a lot. I got this. I got this. I got this. It wasn't until an hour before my defense where I questioned for a second whether or not I really had it. So having a support there to reinforce, yeah, you got it. So that helped. So I went through the defense, went through my presentation just fine. My chair had actually prepped me with some very hard questions, extremely hard questions I was like, are they really going to ask that?
Yeah.
The thing about that is my chair, one of the reasons why I picked him too, along with the turnaround time, was he was good at questioning. He questioned me a lot, which was very irritating. But at the defense, I was so prepared to answer hard questions that the questions I actually got were fun to answer. They were not nearly as complex as I thought that they would be. So my committee asked, questions, but nothing really threw me off because I was so certain about what I had done. I knew this stuff, so I could answer it. So the question part, even though I thought it would be hard, it was actually quite fun to answer.
No, that's perfect. No, thank you for that. So that'll provide a lot of value, I think, to folks who are preparing for the defenses. Some people just finished like you. Some have summer defenses coming up. So that's great that you mentioned that. And so as we start to wrap up, I want to ask, because I think this is important for folks to consider, what's next for Dr. Tookes now, post-defense, doctorate in hand? Where do you go from here? What's your next part of your journey?
Yeah, kind of like what we were talking about before we started. I don't know. And with being a person who suffered with anxiety for a little while, I don't know can be a trigger, because people who deal with anxiety, you need to know, like, it's the fear of the unknown, right? But the PhD process helped me to become accepting of what I didn't know. So what I do know is that I've defended. What I do know is that I have my doctorate. What I do know is that I have a passion for working with students. So my background is in mental health. So I have bachelor's in psychology, master's in counseling psychology, and my doctorate in counseling. I've done that for many years, but being a PhD student, survivor, also just being a college student in general at PWIs, I've seen a lot of cracks and gaps where I think I could really apply my mental health skill set to help students in college to keep them there, especially students of color, Black students like myself, who may be questioning whether or not you got it. or whether or not you can cut it. I want to do a career shift from mental health into higher education so I can start working with students to see what kind of resources do you need? What kind of mental resources can I provide? I've done workshop facilitation on college campuses. I've worked with students in various roles and capacities, teaching, supervision, things like that. And I've heard concerns of students. So now I kind of want to see where I can develop a niche in higher education with my mental health skill set to help students reach academic success by getting some of these or a lot of these mental obstacles out of their way so that they can focus on their studies. So I would really like to work with incoming students, fresh out of high school, first year students, but I would also like to work with students who are at the PhD level too, because people just assume that the higher you go in education, the more you're provided for and the more things you have and you just know how to do things. No, I didn't know how to do a lot of things in regards to the PhD process and my PhD program. So advising is important at all levels. First year, second year, third year, master's, PhD, fresh, I don't care what it is. So I want to be there to be that resource person to say, hey, you're having trouble. Let's talk about what this trouble is tied to, and let's create some solutions so that you know that this particular problem does not stop you from reaching the point of success that you want to reach academically. So that is what I would like to do.
No, that's perfect. And just some strategy, right? I want to give you some just insights of what you could do to kind of position yourself, right? Is to take your dissertation, and you could even start with a conceptual paper from your dissertation about Black women and their well-being in the doctoral process, but then pitch it to like advice for advisors and then position it in an advising journal. So that way you start talking to the advisor community and put yourself in the research area that way. And then you start building it. So you can do the advisor route. Then you can then shift your work to, focusing on higher ed, journals or doctoral focused journal. You really have a lot of opportunity with your work. So I hope that you take the opportunity to definitely, peel apart that dissertation.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned that in my dissertation. I actually talk about different roles and their impact. So I talk about counselors in training. I talk about those in teaching positions, so faculty, instructors, and I also talk about advising and higher ed administration and how we can apply this information there. So you're right on the ticket, Dr.
Yeah, that's four articles, that's 4 pieces right there, just to position yourself for that next higher education position. And for folks who are watching on the replay, like, we got somebody here who's looking for opportunities, so please feel free to reach out. Because we need to provide a platform for folks to help make that transition. And with that, I want to say, thank you so much. You've been extremely valuable. The content, the information that you provided is going to give a lot of insight for doc students. And so I'll leave you with kind of a last word about any advice or things that you would give to yourself. All right, when you first started your program, what would you say to yourself back then when you initially started?
You're not going to understand everything, and that's okay, because you're going to get it done. Don't worry about the how. Don't worry about how it's going to get done. Just know you're going to get done. Because I was so busy trying to figure out how, when. Just know you're not going to know a lot. That's okay. You're going to finish. And that's the last thing I want to say. Whoever is in this position, you will finish. You will. Like, I don't care what the situation looks like or how many setbacks you've had or what your chair is telling you or whoever, you will finish this doctorate, because you would not have started this if you didn't want to get it done. You're going to finish it. Keep telling yourself that.
Perfect. Those are great words. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Juanita Tookes, who has just finished her dissertation. Woo-hoo! Ink is fresh, is drying up right now. I'm so excited for you, for all the possibilities for your career and what happens next. What I'm hoping is from these videos is that folks see this 3-5 years out, and you may go back and like, this is what I thought. And then this is where you are, 3-5 years later. So I'm excited about that. So I want you to stay behind the scenes for a second. I'm just gonna do a quick outro and then we'll talk for a couple minutes.
Okay.
So thank you so much. I just want to say thank you all for tuning in. We've had an engaged audience, for the last about hour. So I really want to say thank you all for tuning in to Done Dissertation Office Hours. And Dr. Tookes, you do have a congratulations here from Silver's Love from YouTube. So folks are watching, so they're saying congratulations for what you accomplished with your career. And I'm so excited for you. And again, this is Done Dissertation Office Hours. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of the Done Dissertation, where we demystify the dissertation process so that you can finish your dissertation in 1 year or less. If you're interested in getting dissertation support, text the word free, FREE, to 301-701-2466, and you get access to a Done Dissertation completion checklist, as well as a free training about how to create your blueprint to finish the dissertation process. And I look forward to tuning with you all in the upcoming weeks as we bring more doctoral students and guests on. to talk about their dissertation experiences. And with that, I'm Dr. Ramon Goings checking out, and I hope you all have a blessed week. And I look forward to seeing you next time on Done Dissertation Office Hours.